So Grant, welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
You were jet setting last week.
Yeah.
And we're an international traveler.
Yeah, once again, after a couple of years, it felt good to be, dare I say it, felt good to be on a plane. It was nice.
I thought you were going to say to be patted down at
No.
security.
I'm very innocent looking, in the airport, so I never get randomly selected. As soon as I actually trimmed my beard back, I started getting a lot fewer random checks in air quotes at the airport.
Right.
Yeah. But it was good.
Yeah.
It was good to be overseas. I was in Australia for a little bit with the team there, and now I'm back, and I miss you guys. It's good to be back for Chairman of the Boards.
Good to be back.
I'm excited.
Yeah, Brian and I did hold down the fort in your absence, but I have to say that it wasn't the same with you not here. So thank you for being back. And the great thing is that we can continue the conversation from last week where we were kind of using the signal path diagrams that we'd used in some of the previous episodes as a guideline to kind of go through and talk about some of our favorite pedals. Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen again to kind of show the rough outline that we were kind of using as our pathway. And here we have the kind of the rough order. So the guitar comes in, goes into impedance sensitive pedals, wah, fuzz, treble boosters, maybe Octavia, or could even be Univibe potentially here. Then you're hitting your input buffer. There was one clarification that some people had mentioned in one of our videos about signal path. And I would say that maybe we should clarify for folks that tuners could also live before or after this input buffer, depending on whether it's buffered or not, the tuner being buffered or not. Then we went to dynamic pedals, so like compressors, like POG type of octaves, envelope filters, overdrive and distortion, EQ and boost. And we kind of ended our episode here. So what I'd like to do, if it's possible, Grant, since we didn't get your input, I'd like to maybe go through this first section again with your blessing and go through some of your picks, because people only got to hear from Brian and me on that one.
Yeah, I can go through them quickly for sure. I wrote down a few so I wouldn't forget.
Do you want me to bring back up the diagrams so that you can follow the rough?
In preparation, I followed the diagram and wrote down a list, so I should stay roughly in order.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a couple of these that I don't feel like I have enough experience to really give a great favorite.
Okay.
But
okay.
I did put some of the ones that have come through the shop and I really enjoyed using. But first one, for a wah, as an example, when the first pedal I ever got was a wah, it was a Crybaby, and had no clue. I I rocked back and forth, played a chord, and then had no idea after that. And I feel like I haven't gotten much past that as far as wah goes. I've never been a big wah guy. But ones that have come through the shop I've enjoyed. There's obviously Clyde, there's a Crybaby, and everyone has their take on a wah. But this is probably the main one I don't feel experienced enough. So you guys, I'm sure, gave some awesome feedback on wahs, so I'll leave that to you guys. Yeah. Fuzz, though, I have always been in love with one particular fuzz. Some could call it borderline inappropriate. I just love the Death by Audio Apocalypse. This came into the shop years ago on a pedal board for the first time, and instantly just fell in love. I think Death by Audio in general is an awesome company, and they do a bunch of different fuzz, style pedals, but the Apocalypse is one that stood out to me. And I won't spend too long on any of these. I'll just go through them really quick. But Treble Boost, another one I don't have tons of experience with, but Mad Professor Ruby Red Booster was a really cool one that came through the shop.
That was a classic.
Again, yep, another great company. Yep. Compressor, the Diamond Yellow Comp is so
I think Brian
simple.
mentioned that one.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's so simple. Oh, yeah. It's really easy to use. It's hard to find a bad sound on it.
And they're also one of your countrymen.
Exactly. I'm trying to stay loyal where I can, where my heart doesn't lead me astray. I will stay loyal to my Canadian brothers here. So that's a good one. Diamond Yellow Comp. Octave, I have to, I know it's not an original answer here, but the Micropog is incredible. Not the Nanopog, not that it's horrible, but just doesn't sound as good. And the Pog 2 is too much for me. So the Micropog, just octave up, octave down, dry, and you're done. And I think that's a great one. For the next one was the Mutron Microtron 3.
Ooh.
So smaller footprint. Again, it's easy to use and it just sounds awesome. It's a really fun pedal. So it's the size of like an RC booster and it just has lots of sounds in it. So that's a cool one. Overdrive. Sorry, I'm a bit sick, guys, so my voice is starting to go downhill here. Overdrive, Bondi Effects Ce2. That is one I always turn on, intending to turn back off again, and I just never do. It's just an awesome sounding pedal, and John from Bondi has done a great job, tweaking that one over the years. Distortion I've never really been into, but I do like, the DRV by 1981 is cool. I also think the JHS
Didn't John design that pedal?
John designed that pedal as well, and I'm a big fan of his work. But that one's cool as well. I think the Rat Pack by JHS is a really cool idea. Multiple versions of a Rat in one box, and you can kind of switch through everything. I think that's great. Should I stop after Boost? Is that where you guys finished?
Yeah, we did EQ, and I think we did Boost, and then I think that's where you finished.
EQ, Source Audio EQ2. I know we've brought that one up on the podcast before. Well designed, multiple placements on your pedal board if you want it to. It's great. And then lastly, this is one that came through the shop once and really enjoyed it for Boost. The Schaefer Replica. So if you're like an AC/DC fan, that's kind of, getting into that kind of area. But again, super simple to use, which I'm a big fan of simple pedals, and it just sounds great. And of course, Mason can't go past the Vertex Boost as well. That is a genuine enjoy that boost. But yeah, the Schaefer Replica was one that just stood out as being a bit unique and just enjoyed kind of having something I hadn't seen before come through the shop, which was really cool. So that's my quick recap.
And on the Schaefer, it wasn't one that you used first, because I know that they're kind of like replicating the wireless units of those, classic kind of Angus Young.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have, even I think Mayer had used one for a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I think I got breakfast in my teeth. For
those of you watching.
Yeah. I had some oatmeal this morning.
Lovely.
And but now we're clear. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just newsflash, breakfast is now over, and
breakfast and wine.
Gonna nurse the coffee for the remainder of the episode today. And Grant, thank you for bringing us back. Now, we did mention just in your absence about buffer input buffers. We did mention that there are several options, but one of which is the Goodwood interfacer, underfacer, all the different variations thereof of input buffer. But just if we could clarify quickly on this point before we move on to kind of the back half of the signal path order, and just for those who are watching on YouTube, we are going to be sharing interactive diagrams that do show this visually. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast, you can always go and reference these diagrams on the YouTube channel that does show exactly what it is that we're talking about. We have some cool different ways to do it. I also have ones for 4-cable methods, so we can get into some of that and some of the necessary tools for that, and wet, dry, wet, so we can kind of expand our horizons a little bit more. But let me go back to the full diagram here. Now, one thing that was a point of confusion, as I mentioned a little earlier when we were just doing our basic order video and podcast, some people were, because we didn't have a tuner listed on this, I think some people were confused about where to use it. And maybe we could mention tuners that we like, and then we could mention where they would go with respect to this input buffer. And I just have a Mesa Boogie stowaway here, but this could be anything. This could be an interfacer. This could be one of many high quality buffers that are out there, although frankly there's actually not that many good high quality buffers out there. So it could be one of a few high quality buffers out there. How would you guys respectively deal with the tuner issue if you're in a scenario like this where you have a mixture of impedance sensitive pedals and you have some sort of input output buffer system? Grant, you want to start us?
Yeah, I'd say I would probably by default run an always on tuner output if your buffer has it. Some do, some don't, which would then place it kind of after that buffer. Honestly, for simplicity's sake, I would just say put it after the buffer. If it's true bypass, you could put it before, but at that point it really doesn't matter. So I would just say put it after the buffer and then move on with your signal chain after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have any tuners that you like that you recommend that we might direct people to?
Yeah, I would love to start this with one statement, and I would love it if your guys' experience contradicted me. But my biggest pet peeve with a tuner is when people talk about how accurate they are. Personally, I've never had a tuner, and I've tuned my guitar, and please contradict me again, and be like, man, that tuner sucks at tuning an A note. Like, it's so flat, or it's just never been an issue. So in my mind, the biggest thing for a tuner is...
Who does the best 440?
Exactly. Like, I don't know. That's my biggest pet peeve with tuners. I love a quick tuner, though, and, a strobe tuner like a Sonic Research turbo tuner, or they have the Mini. I think the Sonic Research, you play a note, and instantly it's tuning and it shows up on the screen. There's no delay. Again, I mean, I just like that. It's probably not going to help you live because you never have to tune that fast. But I think that's a really good tuner. And then like a Peterson Strobel Stomp is another great tuner. I'd say those are probably top of the list for me.
Yeah.
Brian, placement of tuner and tuner of choice.
I would say the same thing after buffer, depending on which type of tuner it is, because if I'm not mistaken, some tuners have a buffer. I think it's the TC stuff, right? I can't quite
TC has a buffer, Boss has a buffer. And TC has the option to turn it off. The only Boss one that I think has the option to turn off the buffer is the Wasa Craft edition. Yeah,
so I mean, ideally, if you have a buffer with an out, same as Grant said, I would do that. Or after. For my tuner of choice, well, with my setup, I'm using like the PBC 10 tuner with it. But if I'm using just a single tuner, I like the Sonic Research. We get a lot of those right now. And I actually have an old like Boss TU2 tuner. And there's just something I've liked about the TU2 more than the newer versions. That is always, it's so beat up. But it's just so like quick and it's and for me where I play and like I do music directing stuff, I need like really quick, just get the note that I need, and it's always just really minor adjustments. I don't like strobe tuners because I just feel like it takes forever to watch, like it's spinning and then slowing down, and you're like this is just like green means go for me. So that's what I would say.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys about the impedance sensitive, relative to buffer placement in the tuner out option. Now, one thing I should name is that any buffer, whether it's the Mesa Boogie Stowaway as pictured here in this diagram, or any buffer interface that doesn't have a tuner out, all a tuner out is a paralleled output off of the output buffer. So you could replicate that by just making a Y cable off the output. And a Y cable is just two cables that are merged to one, and it's not even TRS. It's just all mono. And one side of that Y cable could feed the input of the tuner, and the other side could push into whatever the next pedal is in the sequence. It's the same thing as what a tuner out would do, it built inside of the box, except it's removed and put outside. So you could do that if you wanted to have a tuner out, and if your buffer didn't have it, you could do that Y cable and have that same feature, because it's the exact same thing. If you have a true bypass tuner, you could of course put it first before anything, and really the only consequence to that is it's going to be, the length of the cable that connects to the first pedal that's added. That's going to be unbuffered, and whatever the wiring is that's inside the tuner, which is going to be relatively nominal.
Yeah.
So in essence, if you have a true bypass tuner up front, even before your impedance sensitive stuff, it's about the same as maybe adding, I don't know, a foot or two of cable to what you already have. And I do agree, though, that the best place to put it is either in the tuner out, or if you need it as a mute, to put it after the input buffer in this particular scenario, whether that's after impedance sensitive pedals or after the buffer. And I have a story for you guys about the Sonic Research turbo tuners. We decided one year for NAMM that we were going to outfit all of our demonstrational boards with that tuner. And I think it was about 6 demo boards that we had in our booth. And nobody could figure out how to use them.
Oh, no.
So all of the guitars, guys, like we ended up having to go and get headstock tuners at Guitar Center after the first day because nobody could figure out how to tune the guitars.
That's amazing.
And so that was exciting. So I think for people that don't know how to use them, it can be confusing to understand how to tune it. But I do like that tuner. But I'm with Brian, actually. My favorite tuner for ease of use and for just, I don't know, familiarity, I suppose. I like the Boss tuners, but normally in a lot of my early incarnations, I use the TU-12, which is more of like a rectangular shaped, like horizontal, like it's the most analog tuner that you can get. It has a needle that's like on a watch, And I really like that because it was easy to see in daylight. And when I was in college, I would do a lot of wedding gigs that would be in the afternoon, and I could never see a digital tuner, and I could see that. And so I got really used to the TU-12, but it has to be used on a tuner out. There's no foot switch or anything on it. And the other one I really like now is the Boss TU2 Wasa Craft, because you can make it true bypass if you need to put it in line, and you don't have to deal with the buffer of the Boss pedals, which is not great. And I also think that the Petersons are great. I think the TCs are great. I don't really have any objection to any of those, but the ones I use are the ones that I mentioned. So that's our quick tuner aside. Let's move to volume pedals. Who wants to start us off on preferred volume
Brian.
pedals? It's not a sexy pedal. This is sort of like a foundational element that nobody really gets to see. Doesn't get the glory of the overdrives, but really is the unsung hero in keeping the volume regulated for the entire rig.
Yeah. I have a couple favorites. The one on my board, I use the A3 volume pedal. Very nice, very smooth. I don't notice any tone loss, and it's completely passive. I kind of think of the term.
Do you know what the impedance of the pod is in there?
I don't, but I can look it up. I can't quite. I actually have 2 of them. I can't quite remember what it is. While you guys are talking, I'll look it up.
Okay.
So that's what's on my board. But before that, I had the Dunlop Volume X. I just would get a lot of like issues with having to go in and adjust the with the little Allen wrench things constantly, or having to use the flathead to tighten it, just because I just felt like it always was coming super loose. And that's a very common thing for me to have to fix on people that send their boards in. Like, yeah, my Dunlop is like super wobbly. I'm like, okay, well, it's not broken, because they always think it's broken, and it's typically the Allen wrenches on the inside, just holding that bolt. So I switched from that to these A3s, or I'm gonna butcher the name. Layla, how do you say it? Laylee? I don't know.
I'm glad you butchered it before me.
Always. That's another really great one. We have a lot of people that like Hiltons. Like, there's honestly, it's a volume pedal. They're all pretty swell. So I mean.
Oh, okay.
God.
Did you get that tattoo yet, Brian?
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
No. Soon. It's on the list. So yeah, I would say my top are the A3 series and the Layla. Do you know what I mean?
Layla
series.
Yeah.
Layla series.
Yeah.
Personally.
Grant.
Nice. I have also had a similar experience with the Dunlop pedals to the point where the Allen key wouldn't tighten anymore, and I had to get a 1mm pick, shove it in the gap inside near the pot, super glue it in place, and then it stopped wobbling after a while. But it was a bit of a workaround. So the good thing about the Dunlops, they're super affordable, and they do, they do the job, but over time, I don't think they're the most robust, let's say. In contrast to my favorite, which is the Layla, however you pronounce it, mono volume as well. We've put it on a bunch of boards, never once had an issue. No one has ever come back with problems, and I've had one for years, and it just keeps going. And they just came out, the biggest complaint with those is they're so big. It's like a full-size Ernie ball type size. It's also powered, so it's buffered and all that. But they just came out with their mini, I think, S version, a mono volume S, I think, and it's quite a bit smaller. So yeah, the Layla would be my top. More than a Hilton, and that's a feel thing. It just feels better. So it just keeps winning for me.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the Hiltons, not because of anything inherently wrong with them, but Hilton and Goodrich and a lot of those are designed for pedal steel players. So they're really designed for people that are seated. And if you're standing, sort of the pitch of the pedal can be a little odd for a guitar player. There was also one that was for a while that was a little odd, which was the Bloomery, where it actually went past parallel to the ground, and so you kind of had to almost your foot had to kind of almost be going like you were going down a stairwell or something like that. But in terms of the quality of the pedal, it was really certainly well built, and I think equally with Hilton and Goodrich and a lot of those pedal steel ones, they're well made. For me, I want to give a preface here that volume pedals are one of those things, as are wahs, where invariably they're going to break down. If you think about the amount of stress and body weight that is perpetually put on those, it's 10 to 1 any other pedal, right? Because most pedals you're hitting and then you're releasing, and then you don't have to touch it again until you're either turning it back on or turning it back off. So we have more abbreviated time on most of our pedals and their foot switches, whereas on a volume or a wah, they're getting sustained weight and activity for a prolonged period of time, especially with the volume pedal. So I think in some ways, especially if you're going with sort of like the canonized volume pedals, whether that's Ernie Ball, Boss, things of that nature, they're gonna break down. It's not if, it's when. And I think that you just have to go in knowing that. And I think the thing that I really choose volume pedals based on is, do I actually like the feel and the taper of the volume pedal? And I just go in knowing, that its days are numbered and that I'm always going to have a backup. And I really like the Ernie Ball VP Junior 25K active version, and it's not powered. But it was designed for active pickup, so it's lower impedance, and that's better for a buffered pedal board to use the 25K version as opposed to the 250K version, which most people have. And I use that after I usually use it in the loop of the Vertex Boost, but if I don't have a Vertex Boost, I'll just use it after distortion pedals. And I love the feel of that volume pedal. And even though I know I might get 6 months out of it, I might get a year out of it if I'm lucky, they're still... they still prefer that taper. So I love those, even though they're not, particularly well built. I also like the Boss FV300L, which is the predecessor to the current version, the 500L. The problem is it's a 13-inch long volume pedal, so it's even longer than the FV500, if you can believe that. And those have a really nice taper as well, preferable to the 500 series of the Boss volume pedals. But again, they're really big, they're really cumbersome, and you really have to be down for a 13-inch volume pedal, whereas I think an Ernie Ball is maybe 10. So it's considerably longer, and definitely is not like I think only 2 of the pedal boards that we manufacture even can fit it. So it's a serious volume pedal, but I really like the taper of that as well. But you can't find them new anymore; they're always used, and so if you get one that's on the way out, you may not have much time with it. So I think my vote is still Ernie Ball, and just make sure you have good buffers in your rig, and get the 25K version, and I think go with God.
Hey, I did the research on this one, and I thought I knew what it was. So it's a 250K passive.
Yeah.
So like the one I have, the full size.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the standard for most passive volume pedals, but I think the intent when they do that is that they're replicating the guitar pod, and so they're imagining with that value that most people are putting them right after the guitar. Yeah. Whereas if it's a low impedance environment, really the lower the value of the pot, the better. If you could find a 10K, you'd be better off. And there is 10K in most volume pedals that have expressions, except the expression pots are linear typically, so they don't feel so good under your foot if you're using them. But yeah, technically the lower the better. But you may feel like it's just fine. But what about was there anything more we want to say about volume pedals and our choices, our picks?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty well.
Covered it?
Yeah.
Should we go into modulation? And just a caveat to this, as I wrote here, or I should say Mejia with his beautiful graphics wrote here, these could be before or after distortion, kind of depending on your taste and preference. We go into this in our Signal Path video, or Signal Path podcast and video, which came a few episodes before this. So you can reference that if you're curious about where to put things. But there's a lot in here potentially. Tremolo, chorus, vibrato, phaser, flanger, univibe, all sorts of stuff. Who wants to start us off on this?
I can start off because I'll have the most boring answer.
All right.
And then you guys can make it. You can spice the podcast back up with your answers. But for me, this first section, if you're looking at the diagram, which includes in the picture Deja Vibe, Mxr Flanger, and the Mxr Phase 90, I have never been a huge user of any of those. I more dabble. And so for this section, not chorus, not tremolo, that's different, but basically for phase, flanger, and vibe, I'll usually use something like an H9, which does not do, admittedly, the best versions of these sounds. It's more of a close approximation, or an HX Stomp, or some sort of multi-effects. And then when I need it, which is very rare, I can dial it up. And the other cool thing we've talked about in the past, something like H9, you can route it to be, if you're using it in mono, in two different places on your pedal board, and move it around per preset quite easily. So that's my boring answer. I'm really excited for you guys to just level up from here. But for these ones that I don't use often, I'll go multi-effects and just keep it simple, and I'll barely ever touch them.
See, I'm in the same boat as you.
No, Brian.
I don't. I really just
spice it up.
I do have some that I do really like. Of my board, like I have one modulate. It's the Warp vinyl on there right now. That's pretty much it. And I don't even have MIDI hooked up. That's how much I don't use it. I just don't use modulation a lot. There are a few I do really like. The Synesthesia from GFI, the H9 from Eventide. They're all great. I'm obsessed with the Leslie sound on the H9. Josh Smith actually got me hooked on his algorithm of it. It's just I never use Leslie for anything that I'm doing, but when I sit down, it's typically the one I go to. There's this one I just did a board for. Maybe you guys know the name of it. I think it's a chorus vibrato pedal. It's in a really big blue enclosure. Shoot, what's the name of it? I'll have to look it up.
Mobius.
No.
Maybe you've heard of it.
Have you heard of this before? Shoot, I can't remember the name. It's by it's a huge vibe, and it has like a roller knob on the top of it. I can't remember who it is.
So it's a univibe pedal.
I think so. Yeah. Like I said, I don't know a lot about it. But of playing through it, it was like, oh, okay, this is really like very, like, it wasn't very digital sounding, because Some of these can be very digital sounding. So I'm unfortunately going to have a very boring answer as well to this because, I mean...
So we're basically resting this whole section on Mason's shoulders.
Pretty much.
I hope he doesn't crumble under the weight.
You always have really good vintage and like, you know, stuff that, you know, people don't typically look at. So I'm excited.
We'll try to keep this accessible. So Univibe wise, there's a lot of good options. And I would say that now more than ever, there's a lot of people that are painstakingly trying to replicate all of the kind of eccentricities of the original unit. So, you know, one of them is this guy, Dustin Sears. He's actually Eric Johnson's tech. He's Kenny Wayne Shepherd's tech out in Austin, Texas. And he makes one called the Sir Henry, which is really nice. And it's a replica of a Univibe that I believe Kenny Wayne Shepherd owns, which was Jimi Hendrix's Univibe. So he's kind of recreated that. That's a really beautiful vibe. Also, there's one that's made in Argentina called a Sabatius Univibe, which is also very, very nice and sounds great. And we did like a little Univibe shootout on our YouTube channel a while ago of some of the kind of the hip boutique ones, and those were both really, really great. Also for like small Univibes, there's the Vibe Machine, which is kind of more of like a traditional sort of Hammond 1590 BB style box, like the same size as a Phase 90. And that's a really great one for people that want some of the vibe, no pun intended, of a vintage Univibe, but can't sacrifice the space. And I also think the full tone versions are actually quite good as well. And, you know, they were really for many years the only game in town if you wanted a boutique Univibe. You know, there was like the Dunlop one that was like, you know, in a wah enclosure. And there was the full tone Deja Vibe. And for many years, a lot of them, you know, the guys who everybody looked to for vibes, whether it was Robin Trower or guys like Doyle Bramhall, they used giant full tone Deja Vibes. Or, you know, as they got smaller, they used those as well. So I think that the Deja Vibe is also actually a pretty good choice. And I think that people, you know, want to go with, they want to find the diamond in the rough, you know, and if you're on the gear page or you're in the Facebook forums, you know, everybody wants to find kind of like the cool thing that nobody knows about, and you want to kind of be the first to break it to the world. And I understand that tendency, but if you just want to go tried and true, I mean, Deja Vibe's been around a while. It's really good. I have one on my small board, mostly because of the size. Worked good, really good for me. And it's a little wider than a Phase 90, but it's a little less deep, so it fit better for my application. So I actually chose that one for one of my miniature rigs, but I really like that. As far as like phaser, flanger, this is not going to be a cool answer, but the Eddie Van Halen ones are both really good. And, you know, nobody can kind of get more anchored to those two pedals than Eddie Van Halen. And, you know, you have to get over the paint jobs and the stripes and all that stuff. But so long as you can overcome that, you're going to have a really nice, beautiful analog flanger and phaser sound. Another really good one that's not around anymore, but Eric Johnson actually used for a time, was called the Barracuda flanger. And it was a signature pedal for Howard Leese of Heart. And that was a really nice flanger too. I don't believe that it's made anymore, but that actually sounded really beautiful and was a great sounding unit. I think absolutely was amazing. And also I would say Dunlop did a really good job, or Mxr did a really good job with the Phase 95, which is a mini version of the Phase 90 that has an offset for like a Phase 45 and a Phase 90. And I think it also has like a script logo version that you can depress with a push button, and those are really great for the size, and I think sound really good.
Nice.
Also, chorus. This is a real just can of worms for me because I'm so obsessed. I love the DC2W. I think for newer pedals is probably one of the coolest choruses that are out there. Some people could argue that it's not technically a chorus, but I think most of us hear it as chorus. I think that the Wasa Craft Ce2, like kind of like what's pictured on this, is obviously the original, but the Ce2 version is also really great, and it's in stereo, which the original ones were not, and those are really great. It has a CE1 offset, which is like, you know, what John Frusciante and, you know, Wendy Melvoin used on Purple Rain. It's a really beautiful chorus sound. I think that the Red 7 Little Wave, if you want to try stereo chorus sound, although that's in mono, I think that sounds really good. I think that the Jacques Meistersinger sounds really great. That's also mono, but a beautiful chorus sound. And the TC Electronic stereo chorus pitch shifter flanger, that's a really great pedal as well. And they just reissued that, and it sounds great. They use Cool Audio Bucket Brigade chips in there, which is a subsidiary of Behringer. But it seems to be what everybody's using who's doing Bucket Brigade. Analog choruses, including the Boss, stuff, is all Cool Audio. Those sound really great too, and I think are very reminiscent of the original ones. And they don't take that AC cord like the original TC stuff did. It just works on 9 volts.
Okay.
Tremolo. I love the Boss TR2 that's actually shown on here, and I think that if you can get it modded by Robert Keeley or by Exactone, they're really exceptional because it gives you some options to either have a latching foot switch, so you can kind of hold it down when you want the tremolo to engage, and then when you release it, the tremolo bypasses. They also add a volume control, which I think is one of the biggest issues to the TR2 in stock format. When you add a lot of depth to it, it'll often drop the volume. And so having a compensation knob, and there's a lot of people that offer this. Analog Man, I think, offers a version of this where you can have a volume control. And I think Monty Allams, who you can buy kind of like DIY kit mods for, adds that to the TR2. Those are all really awesome. And the TR2 is kind of the last of the analog tremolo. There's not a lot of people making analog trem anymore. Most people for this particular category of pedals have almost all migrated, like Grant and Brian did, to multi-effects. And so there's not a lot of these left where people are using individual pedals. And I can understand if this is kind of something that's not an important piece of your sound, that it's not advisable to occupy individual spaces for pedals on these, and instead to get something that can kind of do it all in one. But man, when you go and you compare a Mobius or an H9 or any of these to these individual pedals, these are always going to shine through. Vibrato, the Boss VB2, I think is really great. The Wasa Craft version is super close to the original. And maybe Rotary, man, this is a tough one. All right, so Rotary, Brian says he likes the H9, but I'll tell you the best one out there, and it's analog, is the Hughes and Kettner Rotosphere. Now, you really got to be committed space-wise to using this thing. I think it works on 12-volt AC at like 1 or 2 amps, so there's not a lot of power supplies that can handle it. You're going to have to like use a wall wart. But man, it sounds glorious. It was the Charlie Hunter sound for many years. If you guys are familiar with Charlie Hunter, he's like I think now he's at 7, but he was using 8 strings for a long time, and it's just like one of the most like soulful, kind of just groove-oriented players of all time. And he used a Hughes and Kettner, and that was a really great rotary pedal. And then I think another really good one that is analog as well is the DLS Rotosim. And Osnoy used that a lot. I think he's got a smaller version now, but that's a really great sounding unit, and fully analog, not digital at all. I think they're really beautiful and really nails that sound as well. So I think that's a pretty good sampling, I think, of modulation. Anything else we should be adding to this, or anything else that this brought up for you, either of you?
I researched what that other pedal was. It's the Midnight Vibe, built by
the Weaver Effects.
Yeah, Weaver Effects. Yeah,
I haven't
that
tried
one was a
his
really
stuff,
cool one.
Yeah, I know a lot of people really dig it, and it seems like it's a really cool product. One of these days I should get my hands on one, but it seems like it's in that same echelon of kind of like the Vibro or the Sir Henry or the Sabatius and kind of those more boutique univibes. There's even one I saw in Greece. It's like 1,300 euros. It's called the Gypsy Vibe. You really got to be committed to Vibe. 1,300 euros.
Hey, yeah. It's the Midnight. It's a big pedal actually. Yeah. If I can, never mind. I was gonna show you, but it's disabled. I did it for a build, and it was like that, and he had that Dimension. I think you mentioned that the Dimension C a minute ago. Like he had a couple of those on there. This whole board around was just like a really cool thing, but that was like the one I was like, okay, this is a cool, like something I don't get in often, and really was digging it.
Yeah. Should we move on to time-based stuff? Delay, reverb.
I'll just mention two really quick because for chorus and trem, those are two that I think are great to have as individual.
Right,
totally agree on Dimension C. I have that one as well. And no knobs, only push buttons. So limited options is actually really cool to see what you can come up with.
Do you mean the one behind you?
What's that?
Yeah, you got one behind you.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, here we go.
Right there.
Dimension C. Love that pedal. I can't see myself on the camera. Didn't even realize. Also, for stereo cores, the Mxr Stereo Core sounds awesome and very affordable. And for tremolo, one that people may not have heard of, but also sounds really great, is the Vertex Effects, based out of New Zealand, liquid tremolo. Is a pretty cool take on a whole bunch of different tremolo options. Just wanted to add those two in just in case people were curious about a couple of those, especially on trem. But we should definitely get into time-based if you guys are all good on those.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Cool. So who wants to start us off with time-based stuff?
I can get it started, see what happens.
All right, let's see what happens.
I'll keep it quick. I know there's 1,000,001 delay and reverb options, but if I had to pick one for my board, I would probably, for delay, another one I might butcher. Everyone says differently. Moog versus Moog. The Moog Mf104m, which is again, it's a big analog delay, but the reason I love it, it does have onboard tap. It has a bit of MIDI, which is a bit cumbersome to use, but it does have MIDI. But the modulation and kind of the mod section on it is very powerful to the point where it can go over the top very quickly. But you can use it for a couple of different things, and it sounds really good. So it's a great analog delay. The repeats are definitely darker. It's not going to give you a Boss DD5 type sound, but it's a really fun pedal to use and has a bunch of routing options kind of built into it as well. So if I had to pick one, I would probably go for that. And then for reverb, I would probably not the most exciting answer, but I love the Chase Bliss, the CXM 1978, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's a really fun pedal to use as well. Not the most original answer, but that's what I would pick if I had to pick one for my board.
That's some real estate right there.
It is some real estate, but I think it's worth the gym membership to strengthen up my lower back to make it happen.
Gotta pump it up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll jump in. I always result back to the timeline, just digitally for me, just because I'm not an analog guy. Like, I have a DM2 and it's a great pedal, but like, I just don't have enough time. My first delay was a Nova delay by TC, actually, because Nigel Hendroff from Hillsong had one. And I was like, oh, that looks like a really cool delay. I should try it. And I loved it. And I've had it numerous times. So the timeline's always been like my one I always go back to. Like, it's currently, you can't see it, but it's on my board right now. So it's between the timeline and the Nova delay. If I had to pick something a lot more simpler, it'd be like a DD7 or something really simple. I've had that on a couple really compact boards before. So those are mine. There's a couple I would love to try, like the Art Van delay, and like those are the ones like I would love to try. I just have never had my hands on one. So for reverb, I guess this could be a reverb or delay. The Gfi Tempest is also really, really good. I've had that one on my board a couple of different times. There's a few things that I'm not a fan of when it comes to it with like the trails and stuff, where I am with the Strymons. So I'm a huge fan of the Tempest reverb. The actual sounds are really great. The Big Sky reverb, and I actually really like the Chase Bliss Dark World reverb and the Strymon Flint. Those are like, the Strymon Flint is like a real one of those like hidden gems that everyone kind of forgets about. because it doesn't have all the crazy cool effects like MIDI and all that stuff. But like when you need a solid reverb, it always ends up being like one of my top choices.
Nice.
So that's it for me.
All right, so delay. I feel like I have to sort of like parse this in different categories of delay. So for analog, I think, and I'm going to stick to stuff that you can still get, you know, because we could go into like old crazy stuff that nobody's going to be able to access. I think one of the best analog delay pedals that's come out in the last 10 years, now this is a hot take, is the Rocket Clockwork delay. And it is their replica of a Electro Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man. And in fact, they got the designer of the original Memory Man to design their delay unit in the Clockwork.
Yeah.
And it is as close as I found to the original Memory Man, including the reissues that Electro Harmonix has put out themselves. And I would say that the thing that most of them miss that this really encapsulates is there is a certain imperfection of the delays that come out of a Memory Man that are somewhat unpredictable. Sometimes you'll get these sort of like rogue repeats or sort of these weird artifacts that this captures so well. And it also has tap tempo, which is great. And it also has the ability to bypass the modulation. So on an original Memory Man, you sort of just had the choice of chorus or vibrato and then just an intensity. And this allows you to control sort of the speed and the depth, and then you can also fully bypass the modulation section should you choose. And it's also stereo, which the original Memory Man was not. So I think that is a really impressive pedal that deserves way more credit than it's gotten. The only drawback, in my opinion, of the entire thing is that the graphics are a little unusual. So if you can get past that, then it's an amazing pedal. I really love that. For analog delay, it's one of my favorite analog delays of the last decade. Really, really an amazing pedal. On the digital delay side, I think that there's a couple of really great options. I really love, and this falls into the delay and reverb side, I really love the Source Audio Collider. And I really love it in particular for wet, dry, wet rigs because it has the ability to internally put itself in parallel with the delay and reverb. In parallel, it has its own mixer. So you can run them 100% wet in parallel, kill dry. It has an analog dry through, and you can set the parameters, however you want. Now, I would say the drawback of it is it doesn't have a digital display. So a lot of the programming you're going to have to do through their software. So I think that's a downside to it. But sound-wise, it is really, really excellent. I think they sound great. The algorithms are fantastic. I think that works really well. I also think for digital delay, I really like the Free the Tone 2290 replica, which they call the Flight Time. I think that's a really excellent delay. Sounds really great. It is mono, which is 2290 was as well. So if you wanted to get stereo, you'd have to get two of them. They also have another version that's similar called the Future Factory. I haven't played that, so I can't validate how it sounds relative to the Flight Time, but the Flight Time is a really excellent sounding delay for digital delay. I'm trying to think of what else I really like for digital delay. I like the DD2, man. The original Boss DD2 is a really excellent one. Eric Johnson had used one of those for a time, and I think that they really sound great. They're very simple, very abbreviated, and I think that they are excellent sounding, undoubtedly, for a digital delay. Now, I know that's kind of gets into what's not available, so I apologize to anybody who is looking for things that are available now. And for reverb, there's really only two choices in my mind. Actually, we'll expand this to three. And even though you can't get this new, you can still get them pretty easily. The Hardwire RV7 has a Lexicon chip in it. It is probably one of the best, most accurate, kind of classic rack sounding, kind of PCM era Lexicon reverb. The RV7 by Hardwire, which is a subsidiary of Digitech, which is now a subsidiary of Samsung. Another one from the same brand, Digitech, is the Polaris Reverb, which is sort of the next generation of the RV7. Polaris is also excellent. It has a very sort of classic lexicon sounding reverb. Now, it doesn't have MIDI, it doesn't have all those things, but in all honesty, if we're thinking about hit songs that used reverb, it's usually one reverb sound per song, and they might be changing the reverb afterward, but that's a really great sounding one that's excellent. And I would say of newest pedals that you can still get, I really think that the Universal Audio Golden Reverb sounds really great as well, and they've of course taken some of their classic algorithms that they've already had in their software for years and years, and have implanted them in pedals, and I think that sounds really good, especially for like the plate in the room in the hall type sounds. I really like the Golden for that, and I think it sounds really great for kind of those classic studio reverbs. And again, that doesn't have MIDI. Every one that I mentioned for reverb doesn't have MIDI, and I kind of feel like you don't really need MIDI for reverb in most cases. It's kind of one of those things that should be there, and is kind of more subtle and in the background. I mean, maybe some people need some crazy options for that, but I think for most of us, whether you're talking about reverb on your Fender amplifier or reverb in a pedal format, it's usually kind of like one standardized sound, and then you're unless you're doing a shimmer or you have a specific thing that you need to do, then of course you need to go with the Strymons or whatever it is. And I forgot one MIDI time-based effect that actually is really great and is better than Brian's timeline. It's the Boss DD500.
Okay.
And I think the Boss DD500 is the best multi-effect delay that is in existence right now, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple reasons. One is that you can set separate delay patterns for left and right, which is a really cool thing. So you can have two different times going at the same time. I don't think you can do that on the timeline.
No, because that's a dual like two engines, right? Like it'll two different delays. Is that what you're saying? Like two different
you can
types of
set
delays?
two. You can just set a delay A and a delay B, and that's
the
really
timeline's only
useful,
one.
especially if you're doing sort of like the vintage rack style sounds, where maybe it would be very typical, where you would have, let's say, left side be twice the time as the right side, which would be half the time, but then you would put almost double the mix in repeats on the shorter delay time, or at least double the repeats on the shorter delay time. And so you get this really cool offset in trying to create dimension between two different delay sounds. And I think the DD500, if you want sort of those 80s delay sounds, whether we're talking about, of course, the classic Roland rack units, or you're talking about tape echoes. I think that the thing when people play a timeline or they fill in the blank product and they go, well, the tape echo sound is insane. It sounds so accurate, but they've never played an EP3. It's, I don't feel like you can say that in good faith, and I feel like I have most of the original units that the DD500 is replicating as is the timeline, and have a good reference point for what those sounds are supposed to be like. And I can tell you that the DD500, although it maybe is not as sexy of a boutique brand as a Strymon, it's more accurate in nailing a lot of those classic sounds. I'm not saying that the Strymon is a bad pedal. It is a great pedal, and I think the timeline unquestionably is one of the best delays that was ever made. I just think because Boss is more mainstream, they don't get the same sort of mystique as the Strymon might get in terms of what it does, and it's a more sort of pedestrian answer, but I think it is the best multi-effects digital delay that's out there. If you really care about tone and you want it to sound as close to the things that it's emulating, I mean, half the pedals that are in a lot of the multi-effects delays are replicating Boss delays, whether it's the DM2 or the digital delays or the the Boss rack units and stuff like that guys like Van Halen used. So those are my hot takes.
Have you ever, on the potentially one that might pair well with the DD500, have you spent much time, either of you, with the Eventide time factor? That's one that I think is very underrated. I would pick it over the timeline in a heartbeat. It can do the dual delays. It can do all sorts of stuff, and was made I don't know how many years before the timeline even came out. That one's a very good pedal as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sell them at, sorry, we got to echo. We sell them at the shop. I've had a couple people ask differences and they've demoed them, and a lot of them love the time factor, but it ends up being a lot larger than the spot that they need to put it in. That's a huge factor. It's a huge time factor.
Hey.
Didn't even mean to do that. It just happens. So I think it sounds great. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of those algorithms are in the H9, right? I'm assuming so. Yeah. I think it is a very solid, if you have the space for it, it's another amazing option.
Yeah. Yeah, the time factors are good, and they had basically the H9 was putting the time factor, the mod factor, the pitch factor, the black hole reverb, and putting them all into one unit. Of course, you can't use them all at the same time in the H9. You can only use one at a time. But yeah, I think that those were good. I usually think most people who downplay it, they talk about that it doesn't have analog drive through, and that being an issue in terms of latency and stuff like that. But I think most of that is just up in your mind and not in practical application. And if you were really that concerned, throw it into a parallel mixer, and there's your dry signal. So problem solved if you really are concerned about that. We've gone a little over, or just about an hour here. I don't know if we want to continue with this and maybe go to some of the sort of wet, dry, or 4-cable method incarnations where maybe a few extra devices will be present in those particular cases, or if we want to wrap for today. What do you guys think? Should we go into some of the extra pedals that might be needed for some of these alternative setups, or do we want to save that for another episode?
I'd be happy to wrap and then spend good time on 4-cable or alternate routing. I think that could be something we could really dive into, because that opens up a whole nother can of worms with options.
So these will be things like noise gates and different sorts of mixers, potentially also cabinet simulations potentially, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. All right, so we've had the diagram on the screen for really most of the time. So soak it up. We've gone through kind of the major food groups here in terms of everything that you might want from start to finish in your signal path. Of course, we did end the signal path again with an output buffer, and as we mentioned, there's lots of different options here. But if you want a really high quality version of a buffer, you could get something like a Goodwood audio interfacer, or many of the other custom versions that they offer through their website. A Mesa Boogie Highwire is another great option. Another fellow countryman of Grant's, Mario at Access Electronics, has some really great options that he's been releasing for input and output buffer, and he was actually the designer of the Mesa Boogie series buffers, the Stowaway, and all that stuff. We're going to have a version of input-output buffer that's going to be releasing here very soon. So there are tons of good options. I think the main thing you need to make sure is that you at least have a 1 meg input impedance and as low output impedance as possible. And, unfortunately, there's not a lot of companies that are doing this. A lot of people are making buffers as sort of just like something that people want, so they make them. But take it from guys like Brian, Grant, and me, that it's not something you want to just get a buffer because it says buffer on it. It's like buying an overdrive and thinking that every overdrive is going to be the same as a Klon. They're very different depending on which buffer you get, and you need to invest in something that's high quality if you want to maintain the signal integrity. So it's just my last rant. Any final thoughts on the signal path and our pedal choices therein before we complete for today?
No,
I am all happy. Sorry, Brian.
All happy. You're fine. It's my internet's really lagging. You said what? Grant? I didn't hear it. It was so delayed. That's what I'm saying. It was all stuttered.
You said what? I was just saying I'm all good. I feel like I've covered my different pedals. So it's I was just handing off to you, and
I see.
Now in hindsight, it was an awkward handoff. I'm so sorry, Brian.
I'm sorry. No, my internet sucks. So I would just say don't be afraid, to like certain pedals that maybe aren't, the hottest item out there. There's some good stuff that's old, there's a lot of great stuff out there. It's just mainly what you like in your sound. So have fun. Yeah. Happy hunting.
Yeah, have fun. Ultimately, if it sounds good, it is good. So don't let our opinions override anything that you hold sacred, but also feel free to experiment and endeavor on your own. And if you liked the podcast and the content today, if you're watching this on YouTube, definitely give us a thumbs up and subscribe, because that makes sure that you get notified every time that we come out with new content, so that you're able to watch and listen to our updated podcast. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you find your podcast, give us a review. That goes a long way in helping other people find this information, or share it with your guitar playing, bass playing, guitar pedal fanatic friends. And so that they are aware that this podcast exists, that goes a long way in helping us and sustaining what it is that we're doing. And we really appreciate you either watching and or listening. And we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.